Hello, everyone. Very good morning. Today, we are going to talk about a very important topic for today's time, and that is called Servant Leadership 2.0. You might have thought or heard servant leadership. And what is this 2.0? And that's the evolution that we're going to talk about leadership in today's world. And we will slip into it shortly. But before that, I have one question to all of us. Have you ever worked with someone or been a friend with someone who's truly put your growth before their own success? And if the answer is no, then I'd like you to imagine how would that feel to be prioritized for our growth first before we even could think about the other person's growth, right? And what if I told you that the most powerful leaders aren't the ones who will wield their command authority over the titles that they hold, but the ones who would truly serve their team and their organization. And that is the sense of true servant leadership. In a world where leadership is often associated with power, decision making, and control, the best leaders have taken a very different approach. And that approach is putting their people or teams first. They just don't lead the teams for the sake of leading with a title and that hierarchy that we have. But the true and the powerful leaders are the ones that empower their team, support them, and uplift the teams for their own growth. And that is a nutshell servant leadership. And I have had the first hand experience of seeing the difference between a leader who leads by the title and a leader who leads the team with service. It was December 2023, and that is when I learned about servant leadership in the most unexpected way. So, December 2023, we all know that it is the year end appraisal discussion, right? The performance discussion that we will have typically at the year end, a conversation between a manager and their team member. So was mine. My manager went on to talk about how my whole year was, what I could have worked better, and what went well. And towards the end, he said something which was very sweetly surprising for me, as well as a bit of shocking a statement. He said, Kavina, you're the most sought after manager to work with. And that was a moment of revelation for me. It hit me hard as to what really changed for me to hear something like that. And that was a very big statement that I could ever hear. So I went back to my desk post my conversation with my boss, and I started thinking as to what really changed in this particular year where I could get such a great comment from a manager. And that is when it hit me hard that Toastmasters, which is a non-profit voluntary organization where I took up a leadership role, has transformed my leadership approach. I had learned and discovered the essence of servant leadership at Toastmasters that had showed up how I showed up at my work. So, what really happened at Toastmasters? In June 2022, I stepped up to take a role of a club president at the Toastmasters Club as I entered my first executive committee meeting. Executive committee meeting are the strategic meetings where the board of directors would come together and discuss the strategic planning and execution for the welfare of the organization. In this context, it was the Toastmasters Club in itself. I walked in as a first time president to the first XCOM meeting with thousands of dreams and aspirations, only to realize that what I thought would be that killer meeting did not go well. I was dejected. I came back after the meeting and I was wondering what really happened. Nobody in the XCOM wanted to hear me out, my plans and my executions, my strategy, and all of that. And that made me really sad and dejected. I came back thinking as to what really is the difference because at work people would want to listen to me and work towards a common goal, but I was not able to do that at XCOM. And what I realized is that there was a huge difference at how I was operating and the environment was operating at the corporate, and how a non-profit voluntary organization would operate. Obviously, there was no title and no hierarchy which could come in a voluntary organization. So, to lead in a voluntary organization, I totally understand that. I totally understood back then that I cannot be operating from a position, from a title, and from a power, because those titles does not matter in a voluntary organization. That's when I realized that I will have to shift the leadership approach that I was taking, and I cannot walk in as a president no more to such a voluntary organization. And that is when I started committing myself to listening to my team members, supporting them in their roles, and truly trying to add value and growth in each of my members' value, life and personal life and professional life. The true transformation came when I brought these principles back to work. That's how I started showing up at work. And then I started believing that leadership wasn't about titles. It is truly about empowering team, celebrating their successes and putting them at the first. That's when I truly earned the respect of my colleagues at office. So I was still listened to, but I understood that if a leader has to earn the respect of their colleagues, they should not lead with titles, but they should lead with heart. They should be putting their teams first. And that was a big revelation that came to me. I often hear what Simon Sinek says, and it's very close to my heart. He says, leadership isn't about being in charge, but it is about taking care of those in charge. And if you look at today's landscape of leadership, it has changed a lot. In a world where was often associated with power and authority and control, there is a quick or a quiet revolution which is happening right now, that is reshaping how organizations are thriving and how leaders are building a everlasting impact. And servant leadership was once considered a radical philosophy, but now it is proving to be the most effective leadership model for future. But why is the shift happening? What does this mean to those who are aspiring to become a leader in the new era? Let's look at it, but we will go step by step. Let's now first start talking about the traditional leadership approach that has rooted in hierarchy and that command that has happened. But in today's fast paced world, highly interconnected world, does it really work? Because employees have started seeking purpose and customers have started demanding authenticity, and organizations just need agility to be surviving in this fast changing world. And studies have shown that companies led by servant leader consistently outperform those with the traditional leadership structures and boosting higher degrees of employee engagement, stronger innovation, and even higher financial returns. Now let's look at what is servant leadership. Now let's remember that we're talking about servant leadership 2.0. What really happened in 1970s was that Robert K. Greenleaf first understood and coined the concept called servant leadership. And his idea was, simply put, a revolutionary idea, where his idea just meant that true leaders is to serve his employees first, customers and community, rather than focusing on his own personal growth or status. That is, simply put, servant leadership, and that is what he went ahead and coined the term and first talked about servant leadership. What are the key principles? There are 10 principles that comes along with servant leadership, but for today, I would only like to touch upon few key principles of servant leadership. The first one starts with empathy, because if you have to lead someone from the back, you need to have a lot of empathy to understand and address the needs of the team. The second principle of servant leadership is about listening. By putting people first, you start actively listening to their conversations, and stewardship, leading with responsibility to uplift others. And the fourth one is called community building. What is community building? It is about creating environments where people will feel safe, will thrive, feel valued. And if you go back and look at the examples of leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, these leaders have prioritized the well being of others than putting their own needs first or their safety first. They have not even thought about their of anything, even their safety first, right? So that's the level of leadership demonstrated by Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and Mother Teresa. So the world, as you see, has become more complex, and the demands of leadership has also been growing, right? There has been a shift. Let's now try and understand what is that shift? Where is that world that we are in terms of leadership, in terms of organization, in terms of technology that we are in, and why servant leadership needs an upgrade. Fast forward to today, we are standing in 2025 and the workplace has changed drastically. We now work in a world of remote and hybrid teams. Thanks to COVID, it has absolutely changed the way we are working. Communication has become more challenging yet critical, right? Because we have teams, we don't even know certain team members, we have even met them, right? We are only meeting them over Zoom or Teams. That's where we stand right now in terms of the connection between team members. Faster decision making, because we stand in a place that the world is changing absolutely drastically, and we have to be more agile, not as team but as a entire organization. Hence we have a lot of scaled agile lean program management, because that goes on to tell that the organizations have to be more agile in order to be successful or even surviving. So that's become a core important thing to solve. So we need to, as leaders, we need to start having a quicker decision making process and mindset. And the third thing that we have right now as a world is the diverse and multi-generational workplace. How many of us as managers still have buzzword as Gen Z in the lunch table talking about how do I manage a Gen Z? So we are standing at a place we have multi-generational workforces and diverse as well. So expectations from the leadership has become quite varied from cultures, ages, industries, and it just multiplies at multiple levels. And the last one is increased focus on the results or outcomes. Now, servant leaders cannot be just driving kindness, but they should be truly driving impact. They should truly driving result and the outcome. So that's where we stand as this evolved workplace and a landscape of business that we are in. And the servant leadership 2.0 will be okay, just putting people in front, just being empathetic, just being listening. We need to tweak it a little bit. And that is where servant leadership 2.0 comes in picture. Now let's take a look at what is servant leadership 2.0 and what evolution has been done. And this evolution has truly taken place because this workplace is changing. And we need to adapt as the leaders as well, right? Servant leadership 2.0 builds on the traditional foundation of servant leadership, all the 10 principles that we saw that we have, but we saw few principles that was important, like listening. We did even talk about the kindness and listening and decision making, right? So over the traditional foundation, we need to introduce something called as strategic, and this will only go along with another layer of high impact communication. It is not just about being nice. It's not just about being kind as a leader, but it is also about putting people first, the teams first above everything else. It is also about empowering people that will align with the business growth and success. So, what are we seeing right now? Not being nice, but also empowering them. And for that, we need high impact communication. And I'm going to introduce certain strategies today that as leaders, as servant leaders, that we could start practicing those high impact communication so that we will put people first as well as drive results for the organizations and teams that we are a part of. Now let's look at what are the key upgrades of servant leadership. We did talk about the key principles like empathy, listening, stewardship, and community building. Now, over this, let's look at what is the key upgrades that has gotten developed as servant leadership 2.0. The first and foremost is clarity in communication. Now, the expectation from the leaders is to articulate very clear vision, expectation, and give the feedback to the team with precision and impact. And this is a bedrock for establishing servant leadership 2.0. The second thing is, as we saw, we need to truly be driving whistles, balancing servant leadership with performance, which is another important characteristics to look at, because it's not just about making someone feel nice, but it is also about bringing this team forward and showing true results. So being servant leadership does not mean avoiding conversations which are tough. It means delivering very difficult messages with empathy and purpose and being taken by the team members. The third thing is leading with influence and not authority. Like the example that we mentioned, not going as a president of the club, but as a person who values the team, who supports the team from the back, and who values the growth of each of the team member. And that's a huge difference. So, not by authority, but leading with influence. And that is what will get us as leaders the true respect that we can be having. The fourth one is creating a culture of ownership. It is not just about serving employees, but developing them into future leaders. It's not leading from the front, but leading from the back. When you lead from the back, obviously you're putting the team first, and that is for us taking care and grooming them as future leaders. So these are four key upgrades in servant leadership: clarity in communication, balancing servant leadership with performance, and leading with influence, and creating a culture of ownership. So these are what has changed from servant leadership to servant leadership 2.0. Now let's look at what we will have to do in servant leadership 2.0. Now, before that, I would like to touch upon the science of why servant leadership is super important. Now, most of us think that yes, servant leadership is a noble philosophy, let's lead it from the back, all of that. But you know what? It is backed by science. And what it says is that the research says that there will be higher employee engagement if you go on to demonstrate servant leadership. Why higher employee engagement? Is because when you are a servant leader, you start valuing and respecting your team members. And that is a greater sticky point for the teams to stay back, and the attrition levels are going to go really low. And statistics says that attrition levels have gone really low when led by servant leaders. The next one is improved team performance. One aspect that will change drastically is the psychological safety of your team members. When you are a servant leader, people are going to find the environment, the community that you're building more safe to actually be thriving. And that in turn is going to highly improve the team performance. And we saw that one of the principles of servant leadership is to really target the performance, and it's going to really work out. The next one is the improved financial performance, and we all know what business means at the last, the numbers. And a study by Harvard Business Review have found that companies with servant leadership culture and approach has absolutely outperformed their competitors. And this goes on to talk about what are the different ways how servant leadership is going to impact you, your team, and your organization and business. Now, let's look at neuroscience behind servant leadership. We might always think that servant leadership is going to improve business, organization, team members, but it starts serving you as well. Servant leadership activates the brain's reward center. That is where the dopamine gets released, right? The happy hormone. So, what happens is that making servant leadership a biologically reinforced behavior, when leaders serve others, the brain experiences increased satisfaction and motivation. So if you serve others, dopamine starts secreting because you're helping others. You're improving the satisfaction and the motivation for yourself. So leaders who prioritize the experience of others has higher levels of job satisfaction. And Harvard also has spoken about it in a recent survey that servant leaders experience 40% less burnout because they have that emotional balance and fulfillment in their work, and they are going to be very happy in the roles that they are playing. So that's what the neuroscience says. So before we go on to talk about servant leadership for others, it absolutely impacts our own mental levels, and it is going to help us from the burnout because the role that we play as a leader is totally satisfying for ourselves. So that is one. The other things, now let's start looking at the other aspects of what is a neuroscience behind servant leadership. Servant leadership is a very influential leadership if you look at compared to the traditional leadership. People are wired to follow leaders they trust, they admire. And this is trust based leadership. And this further strengthens the team's way of operation, performance, team building, and all of that. And servant leadership is what is built from trust. And when you build from trust, people will just be the best of the team members, and they will show absolutely great results for yourself. Now, with that, I would also like to talk about few examples which we have seen in our own real life by the leaders. The first person that I would like to talk about is Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and her empathetic leadership during crisis is something that we have all seen in newspapers and have read about her, and in YouTube's we've heard a lot about her. So let's just take a deeper look at what she has done. She's a former prime minister of New Zealand, and a powerful example of how a servant leadership will be in action, especially during the times of crisis. And the first crisis was the Christchurch mosque attack, and she absolutely led with compassion. So when New Zealand was experiencing one of the darkest days, the terrorist attack, and we know how it would mean to the nation and mean to the people living in there. What she did was she approached it with servant leadership. She did take immediate action with empathy as well. So what she did was that Arden personally met victims, their families, and she was wearing a hijab as a sign of respect to their culture. And her simple yet powerful words that I am with you, and the reassurance that she can provide for people and to the entire nation was absolutely amazing. And the policy change that she brought for people. Within 10 days, she passed a gun law reform banning military style on and semi automatic weapons. And that also goes on to how she can have empathy at the same time have quick decision making and the symbol of unity. She led the national moment of silence, emphasizing inclusion, love, and community healing. So these are certain reforms or the actions that she has taken in her nation, and that goes on to talk about her servant leadership. Her compassionate response for was praised across the globe, and New Zealand saw a overwhelming public support for the stricter gun laws, and she absolutely set a global benchmark for how leaders should be handling crisis with humanity and with decisiveness. And those are the starting point of servant leadership. Did it stop? We also saw her leadership during COVID, during the pandemic, and how she prioritized people over politics. The world struggled with COVID-19 pandemic. Many countries was facing political divisions, delayed actions, but Arden, on the other hand, took proactive and people first approach. She was very clear and honest in her communication. She hosted daily briefings in the call. She was completely calm, very relatable tone, and sympathetic as well. She went on to Facebook Live those times to answer people's concern because people were wondering what, and she chose honest and clear communication where she had a direct contact with her people. And that was really appreciated. She also started something called as go hard, go early strategy, where she started, waiting, instead of waiting, she immediately closed borders and imposed quicker and stricter lockdowns to protect lives. And that talks about her quicker decision making as a servant leader. And she also went on to do economic relief for citizens. Her government rolled out financial quick aid, ensuring that the business and the workers could survive. So these went on to give a huger impact during her leadership for New Zealand. New Zealand had one of the world's lowest COVID mortality rates, and public trust that the people had on the government was very high, and she was recognized globally for fighting pandemic as a nation super amazingly done. So that goes on to talk about how a leader can be leading with um, kindness, with empathy, where she can go on and wear a hijab and go talk to people. That's the empathy levels that she had. And also quicker decision making, faster decision making. And she went on to even embed or go on and discuss and decide very fast yet powerful strategies, right? When she had to put out that gun laws, or when she had to close the borders immediately, she was one of the first to actually go ahead and put such a huge law. And when we were as a world facing such shutdowns for the very first time in our generation, so that's a true reflection of servant leadership. And one of my favorite uh, leadership was also from Satya Nadella. We all know how his organization was struggling with internal culture problem. The organization was assessed a very highly innovative company. It was once a innovative giant company, but later through years, what happened is there was an internal competition which started building, and that is when Satya Nadella had walked in. As a leader to the organization. And the first thing that he wanted to work on is to break that traditional top down leadership approach and to move from competitiveness to a collaboration model. And he could only achieve it through his servant leadership, and he absolutely shift from the competition to collaboration. And his leadership was empathy driven. He always hosted open conversations, and he was a listening leader. Before he went on to the stage to talk, he always listened to the team members that he had. So that went on to talk about his empathetic leadership, and he slowly but steadily changed the company from being competitive to building the collaboration internally. And what was the result? We saw that the Microsoft's market value skyrocketed. The company transformed from customer centric innovation, tech leader. They drastically changed. And remember the higher engagement and retention that the team could have with having a leader who's both empathetic and result driven. That was really amazingly done. And I don't want to miss on Indra Nooyi, because she is a leader who comes with a big heart. And as when she was the CEO of PepsiCo, I have read about her leadership style, where she writes personalized appreciation note to the parents of the top executives, thanking them for raising them to be exceptional leaders. And I have had that opportunity to look at one of the letters that was written by her to the parents, and that goes on as a leader to not just value their team members' results and the value that they bring to work, but going on and telling their parents that, hey, you have raised exceptional leaders and they bring a lot of value to the organization. That's simply amazing, right? And that's humanizing. Leadership and leading with the heart, and that went on to boost employee morale a lot, and the connection that she emotionally had with each of her employees were simply amazing. And what was the impact? And her executives felt a deep sense of connect and belongingness that strengthened the company culture. And absolutely, PepsiCo was a top player in the industry when she was the CEO, growing revenues, and their sustainability initiatives was simply amazing. Where they started with PepsiCo, and then she introduced a lot of products to the portfolio, like oats and a lot of healthy products that she has introduced was simply amazing. And that's truly, we just saw three examples, but I can go on and tell a lot of examples. And that's a true reflection of how a leader, when they approach their leadership as a servant leader, they can go around and make wonders in the, not just to their business and organization, but to the entire world. And people will stand and take notice of such leaders. Now, talking about all the leaders, now let us look at how now we start becoming that person or a leader that we are leading, be it we are leading a smaller team, be it you're a technical lead or leading a big organization, or you are an aspiring leader. Servant leadership does not only resist to a leader who is leading a set of size or a portfolio or a program. It talks about how you can lead with empathy, even your peer. So this, whatever I'm going to share, is going to be applicable to all of us who would like to even aspire to be leaders. So, as I mentioned, one of the core principles of servant leadership 2.0 is high impact communication. And that's what we are going to look at as strategies. I would like to put it as communication strategies for servant leadership 2.0, from directive to empowering communication. Directive is a traditional leadership. You go about and directly tell them, make them follow orders. And there comes empowering leadership, where you empower your teams to perform better. And that's the difference of servant leadership 2.0. So, empowering communication, first topic is, rather than coaching, rather than dictating, start coaching. So, the first one is coach, don't dictate. So, the first topic is that the approach is that rather than giving straight or explicit orders to your teams, start asking thought provoking questions. This would only encourage the team members to think critically and take initiative. How was the traditional approach? The old style was, please complete X, Y, and Z as instructed, or I need this report finished by Friday, make it happen. So, this is how a traditional leader would approach and get things done. Now, let's look at how an empowering or a coaching leader would do. They would start asking questions in a way it would empower the team. What do you think is the best way to approach this particular challenge? We need this report by Friday, and do you think this is possible? How do you think this you can make this happen? How would you define success for this task? So, these are certain questions which is going to encourage team members to think critically and take the initiative. If you just tell them that do this, they are not going to like it. How many of us will be liking to take direct, straight orders? But instead, if you're going to ask questions, it's going to make them think, and they are going to answer, and that's going to be a commitment that they are giving from their own side, and they are going to hold themselves accountable because the decision is coming from them, and we all own our words. That's how as humans we operate. So start coaching them by asking questions, and don't dictate, don't give explicit orders. And this will create a huge impact and promote proactive problem solving and develop leadership qualities within the team. Because let's remember that as servant leaders, we are leading from the back. And for the teams to move forward, we need to imbibe leadership qualities and create more leaders and not followers. And that's a key principle of servant leadership. Now, let's move to the second empowering communication strategy that we have. It's very simple. Start using what and how questions instead of why. The questions that begin with what and how foster open dialogue. But if you use why, it can come across as being confrontational. Why did you not do? Why did you fail? Why did this happen? Why did the report not go? Do you understand when I say that? The other person becomes more confrontational, more defensive, and their amygdala starts working. Amygdala is the part of brain which gets activated when a person is emotional. The moment we are going to ask a why question, the other person is going to start getting emotional. And that's not a place where we have to put the other person in. Because the moment they get emotional, their amygdala hijack happens, and they are going to act in a freeze manner or a flight manner. They are going to be either defensive or they're going to just freeze and not talk. Either ways, their logical brain has cut out, and that's not where we operate as organizations. So stop, please, using the old style of asking why questions, and start with empowering questions, the growth oriented questions. What challenges did you face that had led to delaying the completion? How can I help you to ensure that this particular task is now completed on time? Now you see the shift from asking why, to how. What can we do? How can I support you? And this encourages a focus on solutions rather than excuses. The third thing that I wanted to introduce is another important topic: start delegating decisions and not tasks. Let's move beyond delegating and telling that do it. It's again a very direct and explicit order. Rather than give them ownership, give them accountability, give them their decision making power. And autonomy is another key important factor in leading from the back. If you give them power, is when they will strive forward. What is the old style of doing? Send this email to the client, copy me, just follow the instructions of the project. Rather than, how about we embark on empowering communication, which is autonomy driven? How would you like to draft this email? And I go on to ask my team members, do you want this meeting at 8 or 8:30? 30 minutes is not a big decision to make, but just giving that smaller decision making to them goes a long way. It puts them in the driving seat. It makes them feel that they can operate from the way that they could be operating. Let's take a real life example. Let's talk about two leaders: the traditional leadership, who's very directive in communication, and the servant leadership 2.0, who is an empowering leader. The directive leader will go ahead and say, fix this report by Friday. How would the team's response be? But rather, now let's look at the servant leader who has an empowering communication. What steps would you like to take to improve this report? What are possible challenges that you see might come in future that we need to address them to move in on time? How can I support you to make this report the best report it can be? And do we see the difference of how it would be perceived by the team members? The team members gains ownership, and they think critically. They start problem solving rather than merely following orders. By embracing these communication strategies, leaders, I can tell you that we will create a more powerful, empowered, engaged, and an innovative team environment. Because let's remember that as servant leaders, we are not just leading, but we are truly creating a community and an environment for our teams to thrive and outperform. Servant leadership is absolutely the future of leadership, because we're seeing a changing landscape when it comes to leading multi-generational team. And absolutely the motives of the team members have drastically changed. We don't no more come for paycheck to paycheck for the office, but we come for our purpose. We come for the passions in which that we want to drive. So this generation that we are in is no more about just having a paycheck, who can just listen to us and start taking orders and work. No, we would want more leaders in the front. Creating more leaders is very crucial at this point of time, because as we saw, we are in digital space, we are in a highly fast changing place, where we are adopting agile not at team level but at the organization level. So what will happen in future is that we are going to be more agile as an organization, and everybody is going to step in and be a leader. And it's not going to be driven top down. It's going to be very flat as an organization. And to for us to drive true change in business, true change in the world, we should start adopting servant leadership, create more servants, put others forward, drive with empathy, at the same time, drive with the leadership that can bring absolute outcome. And the tool that we can have for this is moving from directive communication to start using empowering communication. The questions that we can ask our team members can be absolutely transformational for them and for us as well. And communication can just make or break, and this will go on and truly provide us an high performing people centric organizations. And that's servant leadership 2.0 for us. Let's embrace Servant Leadership 2.0 and start putting service, impact, true influence, and business outcomes and the world outcomes right there. With that, I wish you all great success in the journey and starting to adapt Servant Leadership 2.0. And I would like to start taking questions right now. Any questions?